Hello, and welcome to Cut the Chit Chat, a podcast that gets to the point with people I find interesting. I'm your host, Anna Moyers, and this episode is coming to you from York, Nebraska. With me today is my guest, Erin DeHart. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you for having me, Anna. I'm so happy to do this with you.
Awesome, thanks. So, the reason I find you interesting, Erin, is the way you seek after knowledge and learning. You support, prepare, and inspire people around you to affect change in their communities. You challenge the status quo. You encourage people to do better and expect better from themselves and those around you. I love the way that you read and chase after understanding. You love to have fun and include people in your joy. Your home is always welcome to those who need one, and I'm honored to learn from you and with you regularly. So welcome.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
For sure. So, Erin, will you tell us a little bit about what brought you to this current place in life that you're at?
All right. Well, time has brought me here. A little bit about me and who I am. That's a pretty complex question, and we can get into a lot of different parts of my identity. But, really briefly, I am a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a teacher, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, and I originally grew up in Wisconsin and made my way to York College when I graduated from high school and ended up sticking around this area and taught at a K-12 setting, and then later an opportunity to teach at York College came about, and so I liked new challenges, new adventures, so I took it, and I never really pictured myself to be like a college professor, but what I quickly found out was students are students. All students, no matter what age, need their teachers, and that you can get teaching is teaching too, no matter if you're teaching like someone how to read or someone how to teach reading. And so I think I love teaching and I enjoy people at all different ages, so it really has worked for me. So that's kind of a little bit how I got here. We could talk more about other things later, but that summarizes me a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah, super grateful to have been a product of your time here at York College as my professor and now as my friend. So happy to do life with you. Cool. So how we do things on this show is we have a jar of hard-hitting discussion topics, and some are specifically made just for you. And we will take turns picking them out and discussing them openly. And yeah, we'll just have a good time. Sound good?
I love it.
Awesome. Well, let's begin. I'll let you go ahead and pick the first one.
All right. The first question is, what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I think I have like a two-part answer. I think for the last maybe 5 years of my life, I would say my career. I am extremely, extremely proud of my career and how far I've come and how hard I worked and how much I've grown. Even now I'm about to start year 8, which is weird. Yeah. I'm really close to a decade in teaching. I wonder, does that make you feel old or just
No, not at all. No, I have stayed the same. You've gotten older.
There we go. I like it. No, so as I'm about to embark in year 8, I just feel really proud of that. And I think that's what I would have said if you would have asked me a few years ago. But now I think I would say I'm most proud of how my relationship with God has shaped me into the woman I am today. Because it's funny walking, on this campus and remembering the woman that I was when I lived on this campus, and either the triumphs I was having or the mistakes I was making, and it's just not who I am anymore. And not that everything I was in college was bad. There was a lot of good things, but I've just grown a lot closer to God since my time, out of college. And so yeah, I think that's probably what I'm most proud of, is how I've grown closer to God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit in those different relationships. So yeah, I think that's what I'm most proud of. How about you?
Well, I think there's a couple things, but, things like career, that's all important and good to be proud of, but those things are temporary. And I think, like, for me, things like career or achievements is not what I'm most proud of, because those are all temporary. And I don't know, it doesn't really mean anything if you don't treat the people who you are in community with well. And so I think, like, trying to be conscious about how you treat others is really important. But along with you, like, I think my spiritual walk currently right now is what I would maybe say that I'm most proud of. I think when you are younger, you have this relationship with God, but because I live in United States and I don't have a lot of struggles, I have some unearned privileges. So have I really, do I really have to rely on God? And it's not until things happen out of your control and you have to rely on God and really work at that. That's probably the process for myself that I'm most proud of. Like, I can't rely on someone to fix something for me, and I have to totally rely on faith with God. And you can't do that unless you cognitively work in the Word and with others, and really make some cognitive and spiritual moves that way. And so I think I've been working really hard in those ways to rely, and that requires a lot of studying and writing and journaling. And I just got to a point where I had to do that. Otherwise, things were going to fall apart with me. And so that's what I'm most proud of. And I hope, like, that's a good example for, like, the people in my family and my children. Like, Mom can't fix everything for you. You have to rely on God, and this is how we do it. And so, and I think I've talked to my girls enough about, like, this is how we get through the hard stuff. So I'm proud of that, being able to work through the hard stuff and truly rely on God, not just say it, or not just pray like God is the magician when I want something. But it's not about wanting, it's about growing in love and forgiveness and being able to actually apply that into your life.
Come on, that's so good. I think it's really powerful to watch how parents bounce back from difficulties in their life. And it does set a huge tone for how you do things. Now, not that you're going to necessarily repeat everything your parents do, but to see how they conquer or get conquered over hard times is really impactful on a kid.
And I think that's, like, another thing that I'm proud of is, like, I share with my children or people who are close to me, because if you do that in private, one, no one knows the struggle you go through, and I think, like, community is really important in good times and bad. But how is that showing my children how to work through hard times if I never talk to them about it or show them what to do? Otherwise, I don't think we're really preparing our kids if we don't share that with them, because not everything is going to go your way, and just because you pray to God and are faithful, everything's going to be perfect. In fact, maybe, I don't think God causes bad things to happen to you, but there's your opportunity to grow in your faith and not lose faith, but grow in it. And maybe too often when you're younger, maybe a little bit not spiritually mature, you think that God is abandoning you, but this is one way for you to grow closer to Him. Yeah,
that's a great point. And we need to learn that at a young, as soon as you're able to differentiate the differences, like, no, this is an opportunity to grow versus this is a time where you were left and abandoned. And I think when the second you can learn that, the modus operandi of God, and that He's not just some guy with a, it kind of helps change your perspective on life and struggles. So
Yeah.
that's really great. I'm glad you walk your girls through stuff like that. So, All right. Well, we finished the first question. Congrats. Woo. Next question. Okay. What is it that keeps you in education?
What keeps me in education? Well, I think maybe a little bit I like school. My parents say when I was in elementary school, I would hold school on the front porch and teach the neighborhood kids.
Yeah.
So I really like school. I really like people, and I'm passionate about the things I get to teach. And it is very rewarding to help future teachers become teachers for K-12 students. And I think that's how we give back to our community. And also it's very rewarding on a personal level, because it's not just that I'm teaching courses so that students can be good teachers of whatever subject they're teaching, but that personal relationship that you have with people. If students choose to have that with you, then that's really rewarding too. And I think you're a really good example of that something that keeps you in education, because you have said when you went to school, your dad said, find a mentor. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, and even myself as a college student, I wasn't searching for an adult mentor. Mm-hmm. And that's really important, because you got to be involved with your professors and then continue that relationship post-college. And I think multi-generation friendship is really important. Yeah. And so people are interesting, people are great, and so I just enjoy that aspect of teaching. And I get to meet a lot of people from all over the United States. I get to meet students from other countries, and students make me better. And so passionate about my subject, and then just the human aspect of getting to know people who are different from you so you can be better too.
Yeah, that's great. I am so lucky and blessed that, that my dad encouraged us to seek mentors out at young ages. But, I sought mentorship, obviously, and friendship with you and your husband and Chris Luther. And I just was very lucky to have such passionate educators who cared about me as a person and not just cared about the content material or just the kind of teachers who showed up, did their job, and clocked out. You know, you guys do life with us as best as you can with setting healthy boundaries as well.
Does any teacher really do that? I don't know many teachers who just clock in and clock out. I suppose everyone's had one or two of teachers that do that, but I think generally for most of our profession, people don't do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important message for your listeners to know, that educators really care about the students that they work with. Otherwise, it's not worth it. If you don't care about kids, it's not worth it.
And I think the number one time where I see that starts to happen is when it's close to retirement. And I wish that this was something that we could challenge, in the future of education, is that we allow teachers to retire when they feel like it's time for them to retire, and not always waiting to the rule of 65 in public education, or you have to meet a certain age requirement plus years you've been serving. And I think that's too bad, because it keeps unhealthy teachers in the school system far longer than they ought. And I think that depends. That's usually when I see it the most. When people have mentally checked out, they're ready to go. But I'm why can't we let those teachers go instead of forcing them to stay?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's you could say it's an age thing. I think it's about when you have the inability to grow and learn yourself, because the students you have when you first started out are not the students you have now. And if you don't engage in them and care about what they care about and understand who they are, then you become jaded and think oh, kids these days, and want to maybe not do your job. So I think it seems like sometimes older people are like that, but like, I don't want to be a person like that. My parents are not people like that. They engage in learning and growing. And so, and which is interesting, like I read a statistic that teachers are some of the people that read the least. And that's crazy. We should read the most. And so whether it's in your content area or how to be a better teacher or just reading what your students are reading, that's important. And being involved in experiences and other cultures different from you, it all helps you stay in education, I think. Once you figure out, like, I can't connect to students anymore, then you can't. That's the decision you made. So I think that's one of the things that what was the question we even started with? Oh, what keeps? Yeah, keeps you in education. I think we answered that question.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you made a good point though about reading, and I think, like I said in the beginning, that's something I really admire about you, and all those trips we've made to like the Plum Creek Festival. You know, is that whenever I've been an ELA teacher, a language arts teacher, I'm always reading, but I'm never reading anything that's appropriate for my age level. I'm always reading young adult, fiction or nonfiction. And, people are like, why are you reading these kid books? And I'm like, because I need to recommend books to my kids. Yeah. I need to be as passionate about the books that they read as I want them to be. And so I read all of these different books to say, hey, like, Susie, Billy, I think you would be really into this book and I think you'd love it and here's why. And so, being in your office right now, even just lined with books, that's exactly so you could just lean over in your chair and say, hey, have you tried this one? And I think that's what another thing that keeps education fun is, there's never a limit to what you can learn. There's never a limit to how many books are out there. Right. So I think that's also fun.
I try to read 52 books a year. And I mean, that's been doable, and sometimes I do more, but I think that's really important is to read. And if reading's not your thing, I also listen to podcasts from different perspectives and like different movies or shows. Yes, some is for entertainment, but there's some really good things to learn from our world through digital reading too. So I think all of those things are important.
All right, great. Well, thanks for sharing. Let's go ahead and move on to another one.
Worst vacation.
I have one. Do you have one?
You start, because I have to think about it.
Yeah. So I already know the answer, and my family, I'm sure, is laughing now, like before I even start the story, because they know which one it's going to be. So one year we were meant to go to Texas to see my father's family. They live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so we drove from like the Denver area to there. And right as we like get in the car, the weather starts turning. And we're like, okay, like we know how to drive in bad weather. So we're fine. Our car is like 4-wheel drive. Like we're perfectly capable of making this happen. But there's a very large sect of people who don't know how to drive very well. And they are Texans.
You mean winter conditions, right?
Yes, like, just snow everywhere. Anyway, so we get there, everything through Colorado and subsequent states is like fine, but we get to Texas and there's just like backup for miles. And this is like the day before Christmas Eve. We spend Christmas Eve on the interstate because there's all these like jackknifed semis on the road. And so like and I think I get a ear infection. My family likes to remind me that I had an ear infection because I was just like whining and complaining the whole time. We had just got a portable DVD player at this point, so cool. we had 2 DVDs, and I only remember one was Julie and Julia, and we watched it like 4 times. And so we had to turn back, and most of the like gas stations were frozen, like the gas was like frozen or like slushy, and so we couldn't really use it. We got the very last hotel room in this one hotel, and then it finally cleared up, And we made it to we made it half the day for Christmas Day. Basically had to turn around and go back.
Oh, gosh.
It was the worst vacation of my life. I hated it. And my dad still tries to make jokes about it. And I'm like, it's still
Too
not
soon?
funny. That was like in college, I think.
Oh,
So I think I was
yeah,
a freshman or a sophomore or something.
Yeah.
And it's just still not funny.
Yeah.
I still hate it so much. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's my worst vacation.
You know, I don't think that I have, like, a worst vacation, but I've had, like, times during a vacation that wasn't great. I have, like, motion sickness issues like no other.
Yeah.
And, like, now I know, like, I can get a prescription patch to put behind my ear for any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, a recent one was when my husband and I went to Maui, and, like, the one thing I wanted to do was, like, snorkel in the coral reefs and with the sea turtles. Like, that's the one thing I wanted to do, and we kind of splurged and, like, bought this, you know, like, day cruise to go do all those things. And I bought some Dramamine, and they had, like, in the name brand, regular Dramamine, and then it said, like, natural Dramamine, but it was still the name brand. I'm like, oh, I'll just get the natural. So I took, like, a pill, and then we, like, go on the boat for, like, an hour to where we can snorkel with coral reefs, and as we go out there, I start not feeling good.
Oh, gosh. I
start getting nauseous, and I'm like, if I can just get to where we're going and get in the water, then I'll feel better.
Yeah.
And so we get to where we're going, and we get in the water, and, like, I've snorkeled before, but Bob's never snorkeled before, so, you know, it's kind of a weird thing if you've never done it before to, like, have your face in the water and still be able to breathe. So I'm kind of helping him with that. And, like, I'm treading water, talking with him, and you're still bouncing in the ocean.
Yeah.
And it just made it worse. And I puked so much in the ocean. No, that's not even the funny part.
Yeah, I feel like I know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And as soon as I puked, about 50 fish swarmed me like piranhas and ate my puke. But I could feel them thrashing around my body, and they were, like, touching me, and one even freaking bit me on the arm.
Oh my God.
And, like, it was terrifying. I'm, like, backpedaling as hard as I could to get away from the puke and the fish. But that was pretty bad. Like, as a kid, like, I grew up in Wisconsin, and, like, the game you play when you swim in the lake, like, muskies, and you don't want muskies to bite you. And it was, like, literally those things happening to me in real life.
No, that's
and
so traumatic.
It was. And so I go back on board, and I tried to take more Dramamine, and literally just, like, slept on the boat the rest of the day while Bob snorkeled with the coral reefs, and he had lunch prepared for him, free everything, and
someone had to enjoy it.
Yeah, swimming with the sea turtles. He did all of it while I laid on the deck and pretty much just got burnt sleeping.
Erin.
So,
tough.
Yeah.
That does sound like a worst
that was not
situation.
Yeah, that was not a fun day, and so I just need to know better that how sensitive I am to motion sickness. So next time
Next time you're ready.
Yeah. So that's my
that's a good one.
Worst vacation moment. I have some, like, bloody nose issues in California when I was in high school. So, like, there's pictures of me having a bloody nose in Disney World and Sequoia National Park and, like, everywhere because it was so dry and wasn't used to it. So that was also fun.
Oh,
there's pictures.
Super great.
Mm-hmm.
What a blessing.
Yeah.
All right, great. So the next one will be interesting. Let's see how it goes. So how do you balance the views of the church, like the capital C church, as a whole? So how do you balance the views of the church with the views of social justice?
Well, this is an interesting question because I feel like capital C church's views should be all about social justice,
yes,
right? like I try to live my life by the two greatest commands: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
And I think people just think about their neighbors are people who are just like them, but I think like through Jesus's ministry, he shows us that we should love people who are very different from us. In fact, probably not church people, right? Like Jesus didn't really go and preach to the synagogue very often.
Yeah.
So it should align very well.
Mm-hmm.
However, I don't think that it does in some places, and that makes me pretty sad. I think things started progressing a little bit more for me. I did this learning experience in New York City about like how to teach the Holocaust, but it also was like learning about Jewish culture, and which is important. Like you shouldn't just teach the Holocaust and not talk about the groups of people that it happened to.
Yeah.
You have to talk about people and their identity. And so we went to the Jewish Heritage Museum in New York City on the Lower East Side. And they have like a big exhibit about like Judaism and their concept of repair the world.
Yeah.
And what can you do to make the world better? And then I've gone to a couple synagogues in New York City for Shabbat, and you hear and you read about, like in their bulletin, the social justice elements that the synagogue does. And they're not just working with people who are just like them. They're working with Christian organizations. They're working with LGBTQ people. They're working with homeless, like anyone, African Americans, not just people like themselves. And I think like that concept of repair the world really kind of has stuck with me. And because that's how you love your neighbor.
Yeah. And
I don't think we incorporate that enough into our Christian life, or the church does. I just read this book by Andy Stanley. My dad told me to read it.
I like it.
Irresistible: Reclaiming the New That Jesus Unleashed for the World. And that really is a good book to kind of focus on. Like Andy Stanley really reminds people like we still try to incorporate the Old Testament with the New Testament or with Jesus's new law. And I think that gets in the way of social justice, right?
Yeah.
So I could talk. I need other people to read this book in my life so we can talk more about it, because
put it on the list.
it's really good and helpful. But I think we lose sight of what Jesus is actually asking us to do with loving your neighbor.
Yeah.
I mean, if we change, this is really controversial for me to say. I don't know if I want to say it, but I will. Okay. We read the story, The Good Samaritan, and I don't think that we understand the cultural concepts of how much the Jews didn't like Samaritans. But what if that story was called The Good Gay Person? Maybe we would view our neighbors a little bit different. So that's my struggle with the church and social justice, is that there needs to be that connection to love and loving others without strings attached.
Yeah.
Because how do you get people to love Jesus if you're critical and judging of them right away? Yeah. So.
And I think for myself, to add on to what you're saying, I feel very similarly on all of those points. However, loving that person while not trying to fix them.
No.
And I think that's some of the issue that we have, is that there is, a whole multitude of different ways of accepting people. And I think, great, you're accepting people. But if you go into accepting someone with the intention, of fixing them, that's not actual love either. Like, I feel like, yes, Jesus in his ministry called people higher and called people to better, but I think that's a journey with someone, and
Right.
not like standing on the side of the road screaming hateful things isn't fixing someone. Like, you know, and I think that's not really why we get into relationship with people. Like, I'm not your friend because I want to fix you. I'm your friend because I love you and I care about you.
Or I don't like what you do, so I can't hang out with you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's, you know, specifically coming from an educator's point of view. Like, you have to, you know, show love and respect to every single student that comes in your room. And, you know, like that's, I think, what God has asked us to do. Not saying like, oh, I love and respect you until I find out how you sin, you know, and then I'm going to change the way I behave. And I think like you said, there's 2 rules that I want to live by. And I think sometimes the capital C church like deviates from those 2 rules to get into these little small rules that you just miss the point.
Well, and I don't think that comes from like I don't think it always comes from a hateful place. I think that Big C Church or parents can put a lot of restrictions on like, here's what we don't want you to do because we don't think it's good for you, but then that we don't want you to do this becomes like the law or the deal breaker. And I think that's like the big difference between like our walk with God and morality, right? Because we all have different moralities. And sometimes a lot of it is tied to the culture or the country that you grew up in. And God and loving others doesn't always have to do with someone's morality, like what they do. Or, I mean, because even, you know, like maybe like drinking alcohol, well, my morality, I don't want to drink alcohol. Well, someone else's morality is they don't mind. So like, should that be a stopping point for us to progress in community and loving God and loving others? Probably not. But those are some of the things that the church lets get in the way. And so...
Yeah, and it is interesting because it's like each person has seemingly their sword that they want to die on.
Right.
And it's like, is this really what it is? Because for, you know, you do think about the Samaritan woman, right? Or like the woman who washed his feet with her tears and perfume, right? Like the fact that she was even in the room to everyone else would have been like a massive no-no. Yeah. And, you know, for Jesus to allow that situation to happen and to also like, you know, continue in the situation the way it did, it's just like, yeah, because he didn't just miss the point. Right. Like the point was this woman, you know, the point was her soul, her, you know, showing love to her. And I think sometimes we're just like, won't even let people in the room. And, you know, I think that's interesting.
And even the way we view the woman at the well, because the story that we probably both grew up with and what we talked about, that woman, she had 7 husbands and she's not even married to the person that she's with. Well, in that time, did women have those choices? No, they didn't have those choices. They could not divorce someone. Men divorced women. And so we kind of take it as the unconscious message. The implicit message was that woman is a bad woman because she's had this many husbands. When we don't think about who actually put her in those places, she was probably someone who didn't have any power. So I think like even how we view that becomes pretty interesting too. Yeah.
The more context you learn about some of these biblical stories, it definitely helps.
I want to go back to like what you said about education. You have to love and accept the students in your classroom. You don't, but then you become an ineffective teacher and you don't meet the needs of your students. And I think that's when the disconnect and the feelings of not wanting to be a teacher happens, is when we don't accept the students in our classroom. They don't engage in the learning because it's not always about just being interesting. It's about how you engage to your students. I can have a great lesson, but if I don't engage my students, they're not going to really care. So I think like that has to happen first in order for you to be an effective educator. And
what do they say? They don't care how much you know until you know how much you care.
Yeah. The next question is, why do you value learning about history in the way you teach non-history classes?
This year I was teaching some more counseling-esque classes, helping students prepare for college and helping students prepare for high school. And I think that those were good in that we talked about their personal histories, and understanding how generationally they have gotten to where they are. I believe that when you learn a lot about where you've come from, you're able to understand where you're going. And if that's a good place, then great, like full steam ahead. If it's not a good place, then you can help redirect your path. Same as a human being, understanding the things that you've gone through in your past. As I think about things from a counseling perspective, the best way that you can move forward in a positive, healthy direction is if you deal with the past hurts and the past obstacles that you've had to overcome. So I think in the same way that you want to understand your own self and your own personal history, it's helpful for people to understand the greater scheme of things where we've come from, so we can learn how to do better, because we know better now, hopefully. We have better technology, we have better social awareness, self-awareness to be able to do better. And so yeah, I think that's the case. But also, I just love history. I am and always will be a historian at heart. My love is early American history. But, it was very interesting. I was very desirous of it for many reasons to, participate in Black Lives Matter protests and marches this summer. But at one point I did make a sign that just said, as a history teacher, I'm tired of having to apologize for the mistakes of white people. When I teach different classes, my students ask me, why was that this way? And it's well, either we didn't know any better or we did know better, and we chose not to do anything about it. And so I was we must do better, and write a better history for the future. So I think that's where I come from. I respect and appreciate and want to do better, but I also know that we can do better.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's important when you're teaching American history to yes, we should be proud of our country and our accomplishments, but you also have to equally recognize how our country is built on slavery and racism and putting down genocide of indigenous people. You can't say America is great and everything we've done is great unless you're critically look at everything that has made a part of our country what it is, the good and the bad. And I think it's kind of in the news right now, critical race theory, and all of a sudden politicians seem to think that they know a lot about it or care about it. But I think we're in a really bad spot if we don't think critically about how our country is and how the people in power have moved through or created systems of oppression and systems of privilege. Otherwise, our country is never going to get better. And I think a really good example of that is when I've gone to Germany and talked to educators and people in Germany, where the German government fully recognizes and acknowledges and admits that they committed genocide over different groups of people, Jewish people, handicapped people, people who identify as gay, the elderly, the handicapped. They fully admit that. They have it on display by having memorials to the people that were murdered. And you can even go to the Topography of Terror Museum in Berlin that has all the Nazi documents on display for the world to see. You can write a letter to the German government saying, did a Holocaust happen? And they're going to say yes. And I think that's how you start healing. And it's against the law to even show or have a Nazi symbol anywhere in Germany. It's against the law. And I think we can learn a lot from that country. You have to embrace what happened, admit to it, and figure out how to make reparations to groups of people. Otherwise, you still carry that generational trauma, or the trauma that occurs to people in the United States who aren't getting treated equitable like everyone else. So I think that's a really important part of history that we do have to continue to teach. And I think what happens when we don't teach that in the K-12 setting, once they get to college and they find out about maybe systems of racism and oppression, it's really hard for college students to understand why they were never taught that before. So I think it's important to show all the sides of history. And it also shows people are more complicated, right? Because we're not all good and we're not all bad.
Yeah.
So I'm not all good. You're not all good. And if we show our, famous Americans that they were all perfect or all bad, what does that say about us as humans now? So
yeah.
I feel the same way about how language arts really goes well with history. And I would say I'm more of a social studies teacher than a history teacher.
Yeah.
I love the anthropology, the sociology, the culture part of social studies along with the history. And I think history and social studies shows us how people are human, and how culture and all parts of culture can make us who we are and make us different. And I think there's a power of the personal narrative. You can learn about the Holocaust in school, and you can learn about the numbers of people who were murdered, but until you read a narrative of someone who's experienced that firsthand, then it makes it more meaningful to us. And I think you can history is a great place to pull out lessons for us to apply today and try to make us better humans. And I think studying history and social studies in the right way with the aspects of language arts can change people's lives.
All right, so next question. What is the one thing that you would hope every student of yours walks away knowing?
I think that their learning isn't done yet. What you learn at college is just the base, and you have to be involved in learning more. And not one degree or one profession, not one college is going to be able to teach you everything that you need to know. So your job as a learner is not done when you graduate. And then also to know how to keep learning and growing in professional ways and in personal ways.
Yeah.
Also, you're loved. God made you the way that you are, and you're important to this world. And so know you're loved, and know that you're not done yet. You're not done learning.
That's great. I was going to say that you were loved. I think it's so easy for a year to go by and poof, it's gone. And your first couple years, it's anything could go faster.
Yeah.
But they, as you get older and into your profession, years come and go pretty quickly. And I had my first student pass away last year, and
it's a special kind of hurt that you can't describe.
I wasn't actively teaching him. He was in high school. I taught him in middle school, but I found out while I was in Rwanda, and I just was devastated.
Yeah.
And that was a special type of hurt because I wasn't as close to him. And I go through, at that point I went through 125 kids a year. And I can't build beautiful special relationships with every single one. So, I made a promise to myself that whether I truly enjoyed a child's company or not, that I would at some point of teaching them make sure that they knew that they were loved in their own special way, whether that was just me looking them in the face and saying I love you, or that you're loved, or, you know, God loves you. I work at a Christian school now. But whatever it is that, like, love would be the priority in my classroom. Mm-hmm. Obviously learning and meeting learning targets and success criteria and that other stuff, like, targets can come, but that's not what really matters. You know, I look back at every single one of my favorite teachers and professors, and it wasn't because of the way that they taught the class that I loved them. It was the way that they loved me that made me love them. That changes you. I think that that's what's has to be priority in your heart if you really want to be an effective teacher, is not just to focus on the content, but to focus on your humans that are staring back at you, because you just simply don't know the life that they're leading at home. At the school I currently work at, I have students whose parents work in different countries, and they may see them as often as I see my parents.
Oh, wow.
Which is very seldom.
Yeah.
And, like, they may just be coming home to nannies and, you know, caretakers and stuff, and maybe they haven't been told I love you today. And so it's like, I don't have to be, but I want to be that person who makes sure that they know today that they are loved. Yeah. So that's a special kind of wrecking of your heart. Yeah. But also, what a beautiful privilege it is to be involved in these kids' lives. And although it may just be for a year or whatever, like, I think it's overwhelming if you think I must be something to every kid. I get that. We don't have that kind of space or that kind of time, but who can you be to that one? Yeah. And one thing that you wrote, even in my graduation notebook, that stuck out to me was, love the smelly kid because he needs it the most, he or she needs it the most. And, you know, whoever is often hardest for you to love is usually the kid who needs it the most.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And we'll miss out. I mean, and I always say, like, there's a reason for all behavior. So if you have someone who doesn't show teacher-pleasing behavior, there's usually a reason for that. And so you're just going to have to work hard to figure that out. Yeah.
And it's there, literally, every time. If you're willing to dig, you'll find it.
Well, what's interesting, too, is it's true for adults, too.
That's 100% accurate.
It's easier
adults are large children.
Yeah, it's easier to, like, love the kids because they're just kids, but there's a reason why adults act the way that they act. And so it's a good approach to have on viewing all humans. Like, there's a reason for that behavior.
Yeah. So very true. What kind of advice would you have for students or teachers who are trying to do better?
Well, I think, like, a really good step maybe is to read some books from not majority culture authors. Mm-hmm. Like, a couple of years ago, we were studying, like, how teaching reading is teaching equity, and we talked about how you need to incorporate multicultural authors. Then I'm like, whoa, wait, I need to really think about the books I'm reading. Yeah. And I need to stop reading books written by white people. Now, it doesn't mean that books written by white people are bad. It just means that I needed to broaden my perspectives and read from other perspectives. So I'm like, okay, for the next couple months, I'm just going to read authors from non-dominant culture. And I think that's like one personal thing you can do that really helps a lot. And if you're not a reader, podcasts, you know. If you like leadership, you like perspectives, I think listening to Brene Brown podcasts is really helpful. That's helped me a lot grow as a person. And I also tell my students when they get jobs, we don't have to be done. You can call me, you can text me, you can email me. If you struggle with something, she's smiling because she's done that.
I literally have you on speed dial.
Yeah, so, like, and it's also cool for me because then I get to learn what you guys are doing in your classrooms too. And so I think we help each other. And I think you have to have a group of friends that are critical. Yeah. And you can talk about these issues without getting your feelings hurt and, you know, work with each other. I know you did a podcast with Chris Luther, and, like, I have teacher friends like that, like my college roommate Casey and Luther. We can talk about these things and talk about teaching to make ourselves better. Yeah. So, like, yes, professionalism, but also, like, having multiple perspectives is really important too. So those are just a few things. I mean, follow me on Goodreads, see the books that I'm reading. If you want to hit me up on social media and like, hey, what's a good book to read about from a minority author, and I'll give you a couple. So
there you go.
Come and borrow a book. Just bring it back.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. We have one last question that I ask all my guests is, what is it about today's world that just upsets you, that angers you to your core, and what is it that you are doing about it or would like to encourage others to do about it?
Okay. So these, as with this whole podcast, this is like my own personal views, and I don't represent anyone else, but this is my own personal view and my own holy discontent. So a few years ago, I read the book called Boy Erased. And it's about a boy that grows up who identifies as gay, and he comes out to his parents. This is really abbreviated part of the book, but he comes out and they send him to counseling to try to de-gay him or whatever. And I'm reading the book, and I came to this part of the book, and I'm going to read this part to you. And so the author, he's writing about his experiences about going to therapy to become not gay. And it says, "And God, I will not call on God at any point during this decade-long struggle, not because I want to keep God out of my life, but because his voice is no longer there. What happened to me has made it impossible to speak with God, to believe in a version of him that isn't charged with self-loathing. My ex-gay therapist took him away from me, and no matter how many different churches I attend, I feel the same dead weight in my chest. I will feel the pang of deep love now absent from my life. I will continue to experiment with different denominations, different religions. I will continue to search. And even if I no longer believe in hell, I will continue to struggle with the fear of it. Perhaps one day I will hear his voice again, perhaps not. It's the sadness I deal with on a daily basis." And to read that just kind of really hurt me that churches or therapists or people can take God away from people. And so like that is my holy discontent, is the view of scriptures and how it can justify mistreating people who identify as LGBTQ. And I just feel like the way that not every Christian, but like the stereotype of certain Christians make people who are LGBTQ like they're unworthy of God. And I just feel like that is so wrong, and it's unexcusable for Christians to take God away from someone. So that's my holy discontent. And not just because I've read those words, but because I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
And to see parents, how they treat their children when they come out. And I just think we need to be better about that in many different ways. But I could talk a long time about that. But that's like my holy discontent. I don't have all the right answers, and that's why it's discontent.
Yeah.
I don't know everything of how to make it better, but I don't want to take God away from anyone.
Whew. That's pretty intense. Because, I mean, how could you look back at a God that's supposed to be affiliated with you hating yourself and you being not good enough?
Yeah.
Like how can a God who tells you love, be synonymous with so much hate that is given to the LGBTQ plus community? Like that's baffling. So
well, and that's hard because that's not actually God doing it, but it's our interpretation of that. And like when people say I don't like that church, or I don't go to church or I don't believe in God because of what happened at this church, and that's why like church is made out of imperfect human beings, and but you can't get through to someone like, hey, it's not God. But when you say you're God's people and you act a certain way and hateful to other people, then it makes it really hard for people to want to come and be with Jesus and learn about Jesus. And so,
all right, well, thank you so much for sharing with us and for getting to the point with us today, Erin. So thank you guys so much for tuning in with us. And Erin DeHart, thank you for being interesting and getting to the point with us. We will see you next time here on Cut the Chit Chat with Anna Moyers. Until then, make good choices, be good people, and remember, God loves you. Bye.